Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Matt Mandrgoc. He is the head of U.S. Public Sector at Zoom. Matt, good to speak with you again.
Thank you, Tom, for having me today.
You know, and the funny thing about Zoom is 3 years ago, few people heard of it. Now nobody can escape it pretty much. It has become one of the major platforms for business and governmental communications. And you've got this idea of the workplace reimagined, because I think we all have the sense that this mode, this multi-mode of working, this hybrid mode is really here to stay. So what do you see? What across industry and across government as they try to reimagine where and how people work?
Thanks, Tom. So as we see governments continue to develop return to office strategies, we must acknowledge that the government employees coming back are not the same employees we sent home 2 years ago, and they're more empowered than ever. They've decided how they want to work, when they want to work, and where they want to work. So first, you think about it, how they want to work. Some employees are just yearning for a return to the office, while others are demanding flexibility to work from home or a hybrid environment. Creating that flexible work arrangement supports both are demanding, but will be hard as we go through this. So, such as upgrading home technology that can have a huge impact on how you want to work and be productive. The second is when they want to work. So employees are defining non-standard working hours compared to what we consider the normal working hours. What we did learn is that there are 24 hours in a day, and not all employees work their best from 9 to 5. We're seeing employees in same building, same floor, same groups now working asynchronously. And third is, where they want to work. Employees have proven that great work can be accomplished anywhere. The original office is now becoming a space where employees can go to collaborate and maintain relationships and not do back-to-back calls or basic tasks like spreadsheets or emails. The employees now are demanding autonomy, flexibility, and most important, the need for technology to support the way of working. The government is needing to meet these fast-changing demands, and it's essential to really empower people to accomplish more and for a virtual experience to be as good as, if not better, than an in-person experience. So a great example of this is you think of conference rooms in government where people will sit and you have one camera up front and it shows a long room, and those at the very end of the room you're not able to see their faces very well. You're starting to see these boardrooms and conference rooms be transformed with technology that allows individuals to feel as if the way the cameras are laid out and the technology is laid out, to feel as if they're sitting across from somebody in a room versus looking further along a conference table. This really provides that a parity of the experience for the in-person people or for those who are working remotely.
And outside of the conference room, then, how are organizations responding to these three trends, this desire to work the hours that are best for a person's productivity and where they want to work and so forth? Again, aside from conference rooms, what are some of the other trends in the technical underpinnings that organizations are providing to give this capability?
Yeah, great question, Tom. They're really hitting three things around the workplace journey. It's the customer experience. A strong employee experience delivers democracy and parity between the remote and in-person interactions, as I just mentioned. The second is the customer experience and engagement. Customers want to feel valued in the relationship that feels like a partnership. And the importance of that whole customer experience really came from that executive order back in December of 2021, where presidential executive order asked for transforming the customer experience. So think of customer experience as not just other agencies, but those who go to IRS, TSA, and others. And then the third is digital transformation. Now, digital transformation, as everybody's evolving to, it becomes a cultural change. And in this, it can be challenging at times of how they use this digital transformation, but the ultimate gains far exceed any challenges that take place. Now, if you step back here and take a moment and think about what the employee experiences in upskilling, and we're seeing a cultural change around how people are interacting. So companies in government will really need to upskill their entire workforce to succeed in a hybrid workplace. Think about it's not just people who are working, but managers, people who are managing for the first time and handling remote and hybrid workers in an environment. So it's a cultural change for many who are re-scripting how they do things in their human resources departments. The second is the future work isn't limited to what it looks like, but how work is done. and more importantly, how we collaborate. As humans, think about this. We communicate in ways that, like through writing, verbally, non-verbally, and listening and reading. And finding ways to, for technology to mimic these forms of communication will help employees really replicate the experience of being in the office with colleagues only better. Now, the example of this is we're starting to see IT decisions being made with the workplace individuals in the government. What's important here to understand is we're seeing that technology is being built into the furniture. So imagine being able to have technology, a kit, being able to pop it up, especially like our counterparts in GSA, be able to put the technology into a one-stop shop, push it out, go in, open it up, it has the technology to make people feel inclusive and bring that parity between them. And then whether that's through these new tools or new ways of using existing tools, technology is going to be the primary solution for keeping this dynamically and rapidly evolving world of work as we collaborate. Inclusivity is possible. And then really, if you think about it, as a result, the entire workforce will require training on how to incorporate these new tools in ways that increase collaboration and keep teams efficient, regardless of the employee's location. And this is the important part here, Tom, from a cultural perspective, as I mentioned. Today, we need to learn new skills to work in the hybrid world, relearn some of our previous skills that we had, and really unlearn skills that do not belong in the hybrid workplace.
Interesting. This pops into my head a question thinking about what you've been saying. And at one time in history, the telephone was a weird way for people to communicate. And some people weren't used to it. And maybe, 30, 40 years later, the telephone was totally normal, a part of modern life. Do you think that's going to happen with these video collaboration programs like Zoom, where initially some people, they don't like seeing themselves in a camera or some aspect of it seems just off? That seems to be fading away now. And do you feel that this will become a cultural norm for communications?
Absolutely, Tom. It's a cultural movement. And people will turn off their video. So there has to be, in a way, to create, I mentioned earlier about the parity and democracy between the in-person and remote individuals. It's hard because people get energy off from each other. And we don't say, hey, stop the in-person. Even at Zoom, we've had my teams together, and the first thing everybody's doing is walking up and hugging each other because it's been a long time since everybody's seen each other. So you really build those bonds and that camaraderie around people. But trust in relationships can be built over that video. And part of that trust is having your video on, being able to communicate. There's situational things you have across there that will be difficult, that maybe some reason somebody has it off for some reason, but that's how you build the trust. That's how you build that relationship with the other person at the end. So when that hybrid environment does occur or everybody's together, that relationship has been built out.
And you mentioned some skills that need to be unlearned. And I want to talk about those briefly and then more about some of the skills that need to be learned. But let's talk first about what it is you might have to shed in this new hybrid reimagined workforce.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand, Tom, that these unlearned skills could be by role or whatever. In this environment, people were usually working 9 to 5. Now you're able to work at different hours and timing. So those skills of thinking you have to be in the office at 9, have to leave at 5. You can now work at different times. There's skills components that you're unlearning, like turning off your video. Turning on your video creates that relationship we're talking about. So setting the parameters and guidelines for the employees allows them to shed some of those things that they typically thought, well, I don't have to have my camera on. Now it's important to have that because it's not just that, it's building inclusivity, it's building relationships, it's building employee morale.
Sure. And it's that sense that we're all on the same playbook here. We're all at the same table if we can see one another. Because even in the old fashioned conference room, that was the hub of all business interaction, you could always see everyone. You couldn't hide under the table or anything like that. So what you're saying is that in the Zoom environment, the camera is important. The vision is important for the entire experience of work and culture.
Absolutely. And we built a relationship. So I think of government leaders as are reimagining the in-office and remote working environments. They really have to have that focus around employee morale, inclusivity, and productivity. It's amazing that how people's reactions, you see how people react to good news, bad news, challenges, if there's confusion, did someone understand something? By seeing somebody on the other side, you can say, hey, I saw you had your eyebrows went up. Was there something that maybe I need to be more clear on and understand? So you can, again, build that relationship, make sure that inclusivity occurs, and that people understand what's going on. Again, all towards that productivity and helping people do their jobs.
And for the managerial group of people, you mentioned earlier that they need to have new skills, precisely, I guess, because they may not be working synchronously with everyone else in their work group. So that's part of what it is they need to learn. What other managerial skills do you think need acquired here?
It's around, setting the precedents around how you manage people in a remote or hybrid environment. As you're managing employees, you're able to have conversations with them on that one-on-one basis. So that becomes your standard weekly alliance. Then you have your team meetings to bring people together to actually collaborate. So as they're managing that, how do you have governance conversations with these employees, helping them grow and making sure their needs are met to actually get their jobs done?
Interesting. Okay. And let's get to the IT side of this a little bit, because you said IT decisions are being made with this new reimagined workplace in mind. And with cameras, sound, I mean, there's an audio visual component to this that's very important. And until now, cameras and microphones in particular have been afterthoughts. The quality is good enough. And, in the average laptop, the camera can be from decent to terrible. It strikes me that IT decision makers need to think about the peripherals much more. Just as I thought about printers in one era, now they need to think about the audio visual parts of the communication chain in a much more thoughtful way.
Yes. Well, if you think about one of the agencies sent people home, and about 3,500 people. And what they found was by providing them the right technology, the right tools that they had out there, their productivity was the same, if not better, than working from home. And it was a very specific skill set that these individuals. So they actually saw this as an opportunity to recruit from other parts of the country, because this is such a unique skill set that they could have somebody working in a different state, different location, remotely full time, providing tools, like we mentioned, Zoom for government, tying into the technology, security, the cameras, the right vision that they have on their actual screen. All those tools that come in, tying it in securely, allows them to get their work done. And again, creating that inclusivity, which leads to productivity with all those other work that they have to do.
Yeah, and the quality of those peripherals, and also the efficiency and the reliability of the bandwidth, I would think, are important for IT decision makers, just so that the experience is not fatiguing, but is something that just feels normal, as if, like the way you sound right now is pretty darn good, because and so that factor of fatigue or echoing and so forth, that's got to really be an important part of the planning, I think.
Well, it's disruptive. So you think about, having a choppiness in your voice or not the right tools to support it. It's almost like sitting in a conference room where someone's eating potato chips and it's loud. It's disruptive. So it doesn't create that, productive environment for people to actually work. So, you think about one unique thing I think I'll share with you, Tom, was really around, and this really ties a lot to where GSA is going with all of the different buildings and things that they have across there. We took a unique approach for the next phase of work with our employees. So we actually created work styles. So we did a survey, and we had 3 things that people could pick on. One, in person, which is roles that, by defined roles, they had to be in the office. So there are people, and there's certain roles they had to be there. So we call that the in person. The remote, where you don't live near an office, but you're going to work remote, and you're not going to be going into an office unless you're traveling somewhere. So that person becomes remote. And then the third is the hybrid worker, who potentially lives in a reasonable commuting distance to the office, but their preference to work from home a couple of days a week or not. So what we did was, to help our real estate team and help understand how you create that workspace, we took a unique approach. So we put self-reported. So in there, people could pick the role that they have, whether I want to be fully remote or a hybrid component, except for the ones who have to be in person. I can pick a self-report what I'm going to do. And it's not tied to past arrangements. So previously, let's say pre-pandemic, I had a certain arrangement where I was in the office all the time. Well, now I don't have to be because of the way the workflow and the work style and the workspace I have does. And that flexibility for being remote doesn't mean you can't go in the office. We have groups who people work remotely, yet they're part of this hybrid group. Well, they all meet as teams on Tuesdays and Thursdays in our Denver office, and they use those are the days that everybody comes in. So again, that builds that team meeting, that brings that camaraderie around that people bring it back in that hybrid environment. And again, not just to do meetings and go through emails and chats, but to actually have team meetings, collaborate, and think of strategies and how they want to work going forward.
And at this point in history, as we are in, going into late 2022, what do you see as the principal challenges left for the reimagined work environment?
It's going to be the transition, Tom, that the cultural transition. So people are trying to understand in the governments how they are fiscally responsible, being able to go into the technologies and use those to actually build what that future is going to be like. You think of furniture sometimes was a 7 to 10 year investment that organizations would make. Technology maybe 3 to 5. Now you're starting to see those things meld together, where those technologies coming across, those two pieces of business coming together and creating that workspace and how it's going to transform. If I have to move people from one building to another, how do we start to look at, as I mentioned, the fiscal responsibility that I don't have to have tethered wires all over the place to bring someone into a video meeting. I can walk into a room, be able to transition and able to show the technology, sign up online, walk in, whether I plug in or I can have secure access to actually connect up to the screen, show my information. Being able to pull those things together really is going to allow for that experience and going forward.
And finally, you mentioned GSA, but are there some other federal organizations you feel are worthy of pointing out as well on the road here to the reimagined workplace?
Well, yeah, every organization has people out there who are 100% focused on the customer experience and the future of work. Right. So every agency is doing this. I mentioned GSA as they're a part of this session. They drive a lot of the real estate around. So part of that is furniture, real estate. You're starting to see these technologies and the workspace really coming together right now. And it's not your typical, hey, I'm going to go wire a building, we're going to go lease it, and we're going to move people in and everything's separated. Now you're starting to see, okay, we're going to put furniture in. How is technology added to it? Does it create an environment for our people to work? And that's the part here that really is key, because every agency is looking at this right now saying, how am I going to not just save money or be fiscally responsible, but how do we create the environment that allows us to get ahead of it, create innovation, create productivity, create camaraderie, and around our environments for people to get things done.
And I guess probably by the same token, it might be fair to say that as people consider their teleworking arrangements, which is mostly home, the home office needs reimagining a little bit. I mean, early on, we saw bedrooms and closets and garages and so forth, and probably going forward, a little bit more attention so that there's that consonance maybe between what they might experience in the office visually and what people see of them when the people are teleworking.
Well, think of the professional environment, right? If you're working, you're in a professional environment. We've created opportunities to now have virtual backgrounds. So they have opportunities to blur the background, being able to just not have any background on. So that flexibility and setting the ground rules and parameters for employees to know what they can and can't do, where you obviously want to be appropriate, really is going to provide that flexibility and prioritizing it. We've done things where, hey, bring your favorite virtual background to a team meeting, your favorite, album, your favorite movie. So those are the things you can make things fun and build that. Again, we talked about before, that camaraderie and using in the hybrid environment, bringing that democracy and parity between the in-person and the remote worker together.
Yeah, the waving palm tree in the background, that's so 2020 now, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, the beauty of it is now you're coming out with all these different virtual backgrounds. And as we're looking at sort of standards of communications with virtual features like virtual backgrounds, breakout rooms, gallery view, noise suppression, these are the things that are going to really enhance the experience, as we kind of talked about earlier, really finding that parity between the in-person work and the person who's working remotely.
It sounds like the Zoom platform itself is not static either these days.
No, we're very fortunate. So if you think about, there's five areas that really create the foundational platform for the workplace reimagined, right? First, it must be simple. It's an intuitive workplace really design really fuels the adoption of easy use and manageable capabilities. And that is the number one thing, Tom, we see out there. You make it simple for people to use, they're going to use it and they're going to be productive. Then next is you don't have to have all those complex training, unnatural change acts, and hidden adoption costs. The second, scalability, being able to scale people. And it's not, now it's about how do we scale moving people from one location to another? How do I allow scalability that if I'm going to move offices, I can do this? Can I bring people in? Let's say, for instance, you have your hybrid work environment. You bring in, everybody's working remotely Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but then you bring in 100 people who are going to work Tuesday, Thursday. How do you create scalability in the platforms to allow you to be flexible and nimble to address to that? And then, you think about the third is really about innovation, which you were touching on. All those things I talked about before. And even if you look at, breakout rooms was a great one that came from one of our customers in our space on how they wanted to break out and have different meetings. So how we're changing the experience and being able to do these things really creates that whole agility for the focus around the users, anticipating, responding to their needs going forward. And the fourth is really around the platform is extendable. How do you take, the prolonged investments in some of the existing or agnostic hardware approach that really kind of rejuvenates that in a new way to use that technology without having to find different costs, but at the same time, all being fiscally responsible with taxpayer dollars. And last, just having it secure. So the platform must be secure, but then then at that point in time, you can provide granular controls and flexibility to the scenarios. And, for my side, it's been very important for us because, as a Zoom for Government platform, we've had ours since is FedRAMP Impact Level 2 Moderate since April of 2019. And then now we have a DoD IL4 provisional authorization for meetings, phone, chat, and webinar. So really what that does is it doesn't say one thing. It's a platform that allows for all of those pieces to tie together around one platform, supporting multiple different functions. And then you start to get into things in the future that are coming for whiteboarding, collaboration, and things that are really going to be really driving forward.
All right. But no way to keep the kids and dogs and cats out of the picture at this point that we know of.
I think, Tom, when you get surprises out there, that those things are going to happen. And I think that you've probably seen many of the YouTube videos of recordings that have occurred where people are laughing and the people stand up and they're in their boxer shorts or their child one's in during a press interview. So there's some pretty funny ones out there. But I think, we have to find humor in some of those things. But again, those things are going to happen just like they do in other meetings. So
it makes us all human. Matt, any final thoughts for us?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'll share 3 key thoughts to create a successful hybrid workspace. First is, as I mentioned, listening intently to employee feedback. They really need to support that employee feedback to actually figure out how to allow them to work better, whether they are in a remote or hybrid or in-person environment. The second is find ways to really promote equitable and mutual beneficial connections for all parties involved. Hybrid really going to require guidance on how to creatively connect with one another in an effective way, no matter where the employee is working. And the third is really provide the right platform and supporting technology that to facilitate a frictionless experience for employees to enable productive collaboration. That's going to be the really key, is that creating that platform that's going to set that. And overall, it's just not enough to tell your employees they have the flexibility to choose hybrid work. You have to have the right technology and platform to back it up and to equip employees with everything they need to do their best work from anywhere.
And I want to thank today's guest, Matt Mandrgoc, is the head of U.S. Public Sector for Zoom. Great speaking with you.
Thanks, Tom.
And I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. You're watching Workplace Reimagined here on Federal News Network.